Welcome to SEC Football Live. My name is Braden Gall, and you can get to me on twitter.com at Braden Gall. Today on the show, we take a deep dive into the state of Alabama. That's right, not just the Alabama Crimson Tide, but also the Auburn Tigers. Our guest is national college football writer from 24/7 Sports, Brandon Marcello. And of course, Nick Saban sent shockwaves through the entire college football world when he decided to retire. Kalen DeBoer is now in as the head football coach. What does that mean for Alabama's future? What are his strengths? What are the things he needs to build up and develop to be a championship level coach for the Crimson Tide? But it's not just Alabama. What on earth is happening with the Auburn Tigers right now? Coaching staff upheaval. What is the offense going to look like? And what are expectations for both Hugh Freeze's Auburn Tigers and Kalen DeBoer's Crimson Tide? So a lot of fun stuff on the show. Great conversation with Brandon Marcello. If you are new, of course, to SEC Football Live, please reach down, give us a click right there on the subscription button. We would really appreciate it. You can check us out on podcast form as well, SEC Football Live. And of course, we are live on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern time right here on the YouTube page. So no more from me, a deep dive into the state of football in Alabama, both with the Crimson Tide and with the Tigers. Here was my conversation with 24/7 Sports, Brandon Marcello. Welcome to the show, Brandon Marcello. How are you, sir? Good to see you. Welcome.
Doing well. Wishing the coaching carousel would slow down, but it's not.
Well, Alabama did as much as possible to make it go as fast as possible for all of us. It was very kind of them. Well, I'm going to start with just the general state of Alabama because you have Nick Saban retiring, the greatest coach maybe in the history of all of sports. The Alabama coaching search lasting all of 2 days. You've got you're going to have a 7th new offensive coordinator in 7 years at Auburn, a 5th new defensive coordinator in 5 years at Auburn because they've had both coordinators gone for different reasons. You've had multiple position coaches resign at Auburn. You got quarterbacks transferring. You got players leaving Alabama. Even for the state of Alabama, Brandon, this feels like one of the crazier 2 or 3 weeks that we've seen in the state.
Yeah, and South Alabama's head coach is going to Alabama as a coordinator. I mean, it's insane. So I'll start with Alabama, obviously. It's we all knew that day was coming, but like even as we record this, it's been a week and it seems like it doesn't seem real. We've had 5 head coaching changes happen just because of Nick Saban retiring that have already affected it. And get this, like 3 of those jobs have already been filled. So in a week's time, Bama came open, 5 other jobs came open, 3 of those have already been filled, and the other 2 are going to be filled here probably by early next week. That's the nature of the business now. Everybody's got to move quickly because of the transfer portal and trying to re-recruit your own roster. Because once a coach gets fired, the portal opens up immediately for those teams for 30 days for any player to leave if they want. And you got to get a head coach in there quickly to try and calm down the waters a little bit. Otherwise, you're at risk of losing most of your starters. And look at Alabama's roster right now. I mean, they hired Kalen DeBoer in 49 hours, something like that. And they have lost a lot of players from their 2 deep.
Well, okay, so then I guess ultimately maybe my question for Auburn should just be what's happening? And should anyone be surprised that this is happening under Hugh Freeze?
Not necessarily. I think there's a lot of things obviously going on there, right? And I think that the key piece to this is that Hugh Freeze, I don't think, hired the guys he really wanted at first. And I think he was stuck with some of the guys that were already there. Obviously, kind of like Williams, a legend there. Whoever came in was going to have to keep him on after what he did as the interim head coach. But
yeah,
it was clear even during the season that they were trying to find a way to maybe move on from him. And now he's gone. Well, you look around, you see a bunch of former Auburn guys that were in that program, guys with ties to that, and now they're out. And now Hugh Freeze is bringing his guys in. Derek Nix being one of them who he wanted last year but couldn't convince to come there, and then finally got him to come to Auburn after being at Ole Miss for 16 straight years. And even Charles Kelly to a certain extent, someone who's an Auburn guy, but someone that Hugh really, really likes. I think the root issue here, that's a root issue. You know, I don't like I'm not talking trash about anything. It's just the reality of it, from
Yeah.
my understanding of it, is that, and I covered Auburn for 8 years and lived there, is that coaches come in and they're almost like they have people thrusted at them like, you better hire this guy. They get like, it's peer pressure, like, you better hire this guy, you better hire this guy, and then they do it. Brian Harsin, even Gus Malzahn before him, all had to like hire guys from input, like, you better get 2 SEC guys on
Right.
your roster, Brian Harsin, even though you are not going to meld well with any of them. And that proved true with Derek Mason and everybody. And then at Hugh Freeze, I think to a certain extent that was the case too. And it just opens up this whole can of worms and realm of possibilities for all kinds of things to go wrong when things just aren't meshing well with staffs and people start going other different directions. And I think that's just the root cause of the issue there at Auburn, is that they don't necessarily let the coaches bring in exactly who they want, and they start making them question even the guys that they want to bring in. They're like, well, maybe, you know what, maybe this Auburn guy was very, very clear and concise, and I believe in it. Maybe I should bring in this guy. And then it just doesn't seemingly ever work. And then you just have this massive turnover after a year or two.
Well, and all of them different, like, right? Like two guys resign, one guy's fired, one guy leaves for a job. Like, it's very, even for Auburn standards, it's kind of a strange and bizarre thing.
But again, it's the end result. Again, it's the root cause. There's a root to it, which leads to the potential for crazy things happening behind the scenes and people making wrong decisions, doing this, and then they're either fired or they have to leave or they go look for jobs elsewhere because it's just not working. Again, it's just bad marriages. They're forcing it on the head coach for whatever reason, and it just doesn't work out. Not to say these other guys aren't great coaches or whatever. It's just sometimes oil and water just is oil and water.
So offensively, and I will stick with Auburn because I do want to get to Kalen DeBoer, and we'll get back to that. But Derek Nix is going to come in. You mentioned 16 years at Ole Miss. This was sort of Hugh Freeze's guy at Ole Miss for a big chunk of that time that he was there, of course. Robbie Ashford's transferred to South Carolina. Peyton Thorne, who struggled throwing the forward pass, but got him to a bowl game last year. They defensively, it's not really that big of a concern for this Auburn team, nor was it really under any of the coaches previously. What do you make of the direction of the offense? I mean, the rest of the conference, what Hugh Freeze was doing in 2016 and 2017 was sort of different and new, and same even with recruiting. And now the rest of the league is very different around Auburn. What do you make of the direction of the offense? That's clearly the biggest issue that they need to solve. They were in the portal last year trying to convince anybody who with a pulse to come there. And are they just okay with Peyton Thorne being the guy now, or do you expect them to go hard after a quarterback? And what changes do you expect on the offense?
I think it's been my biggest head scratcher for them is like, why the hell have they not gone after some of these big quarterbacks have entered the portal? They've been hesitant to do so. They're just not quite spending the type of money I thought they would in the transfer portal with NIL. They could, but they just haven't. And Hugh Freeze has made it pretty clear from the start that he wants to bring high school talent in, develop it, and really build that on the backbone of Auburn football. The issue with that is that the game has changed. And when you get hired somewhere, especially at Auburn, where they've been struggling in the roster, which is not great, you got to hit the portal. Because if you hit the portal and you're at Auburn, you're going to be able to get a pretty good quarterback. And there were a lot of them in the portal this year, and they opted to just really not go after any of them. They went after a few, but not many. And now they're, for better or worse, stuck with Peyton Thorne. And I think he's a good quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a great quarterback. Certainly don't believe he's an elite quarterback. And they've got to get great receivers around him. And they did not have that last year. They've got great talent coming in, a lot of great freshmen, of course. But again, they're young in a new system. So you're going to be throwing them in the fire. And sometimes when you do that for youngsters, especially at receiver, it could stunt their growth, so to speak, despite being elite talents coming in. So I'm a little confused by that. Why they didn't go out and get a immediate fix beyond Peyton Thorne at quarterback. They should have done it this year. They could have done it this year. They could have gotten someone else, but I think that Hugh, in a lot of ways, is very committed to you're the guy I chose as a player. I'm going to invest everything in you. I'm going to develop you and make you a better quarterback. Because everywhere he's been, that's been his thing, is like, I get a quarterback and you might think that they're bad or average, and I'm going to make them look great. Heck, Auburn had a quarterback that they thought was in Malik Willis, and he went to Liberty, and Hugh Freeze developed him into a great player there. And heck, that was one of the pitches Hugh Freeze had to get the Auburn job. But still, they should have hit the portal and got a quarterback. I that's one of the biggest question marks over the early tenure there of Hugh Freeze that I have.
And what's funny is two notes, because I covered Malik Willis here when he was a Tennessee Titan for a couple of years going through camp, and Hugh Freeze famously was like, yeah, I didn't really do anything to Malik Willis. I didn't like coach his throwing motion. I didn't develop his footwork. Like, I could see it, by the way, on the practice field for the Titans, but like the system itself worked so well, and his athletic ability was so great that it worked great at that level at Liberty. I feel like that's no longer a thing you can do in the SEC. Like, you can't take a guy, put him into a good system, which certainly Hugh Freeze should have, a guy with great athletic ability, and just be like, all right, go make plays. Like, it's not Johnny Manziel anymore. Like, you can't, that's not how the SEC works.
Yeah, that, and also I'll say this, like, this goes back again to the staffing thing. Hugh Freeze should have been calling the plays from the start, and he wasn't. And I know everybody goes, well, was he really? No, he wasn't calling the plays. And I go back to last spring. I visited Auburn last spring for a couple of days and met with Philip Montgomery, who's now out as the OC, and Hugh at the time. And Hugh's like, listen, I got to come here and just be a CEO type right now, recruit, figure out the NIL stuff. I've got to build this thing from the inside out. I can't be worrying about X's and O's all that much as maybe as I would in the past, and just be a ball coach. And sure enough, halfway through the season or whatever, I think he realized, crap, I'm losing games. I can't do it that way. I need to rely on myself. And he's going to go into this second year, recalibrate, and he's going to call the plays. But say what you will, that offense wasn't Hugh Freeze's offense really this season. And when you watch it, and again, just a weird, bad marriage. And I think you can't just like blame people around Hugh Freeze. I think you got to blame Hugh Freeze as well, because I think he went into that with a different approach that just didn't work right off the bat. And I will say this, the one thing that did work with that was recruiting. He improved the recruiting immediately through the high school ranks. And I think that's going to prove dividends for them, not necessarily this year, but in 25 and 26. But in the interim, it hurt the on-field product. And in this day and age where we're firing coaches after 2 years, you don't have as much time to figure that stuff out. And I think he realized that after year one, like, okay, I'm going to go back to being a ball coach.
Yeah. Certainly not at Auburn. And in theory, it's a sound approach, right? To rebuild a program and say, look, we got to start from the inside out, foundational pieces, freshman classes, stacking some classes on top of each other. Like, in theory, that's all a sound approach, but you might be taking his best asset, then one of his best assets, away from the offense, which is what it sounds like. I mean, obviously, it's what, I mean, he said, I wasn't even game planning for the bowl game, which, again, I don't care about bowl results, but it's just, it is what it is. So what the other thing that I noticed, and you talk about how the NIL and the collective isn't necessarily doing the job as well as maybe it could at Auburn. I remember his press conference. It had the logo behind him wasn't the Auburn logo. The logo behind him at his introductory press conference was the collective logo, which I find ironic. But let's go to Alabama then on this front, because when I look at Kalen DeBoer and the fit at Alabama, there's things that the boxes that he checks are pretty obvious. He's a great offensive mind. Can't argue with the production. The winning every step of his career, everywhere he's ever been. You can't argue with the winning. Doesn't mean it's going to be great at Alabama, but you can't argue with it to this point on his resume. And Washington's NIL infrastructure and collective infrastructure was built out as well as anybody's in the Pac-12, and is going to be one of the most modern programs in the Big Ten right away, as soon as it moves in there, which to me is a reflection of Kalen DeBoer sort of understanding how to do all of that stuff and how important roster management is. We know Nick Saban didn't care for that, and that's a big part of, that's one piece of why maybe now was the right time for him to walk away. Do you see and certainly staff building is another one he's doing a great job of. If you can hire 2 head football coaches to come be coordinators and assistants, what's the negative? What's the downside for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, outside of just expectations and following a legend. But what's the box he doesn't check in your opinion?
Just his lack of ties to the South. This is not a direct comparison, but it harkens to Brian Harsin when he was hired at Auburn, just down the road a couple of years ago, a few years ago. No connections to the South, recruiting ties non-existent. The big difference between those two is Kalen DeBoer is a much more organized coach and a little bit more willing to listen to people. And I mean, it's very clear. I did a big story about all this before he even took the job there, and Alabama wasn't even on the radar at the playoff. I talked to a bunch of people at Kalen DeBoer's past and present about like how he builds a program. And even then, it was like, this guy sounds philosophically a lot like Nick Saban. And but he just has no ties to the South. So like when the job came open, people were telling me he's like probably on the list of 3 or 4 guys, but I was like, but that's not the guy you go after just because of recruiting. But with him, he asks everybody around him, like, what am I doing wrong? What would you do differently? Give me notes and everything. And then even at his press conference, introductory press conference, he's all like, every time I see Nick Saban here, I want to get him to give me one thing that we're doing wrong. Tell me what you saw today that we're doing wrong. What do you need to fix? And so he's a smart guy, and I'm sure one of the first things he should do, or hasn't, maybe he's already done, is sit down with Saban and whoever else at Alabama and go, listen, how the hell do I build a recruiting staff to keep this machine running here and to beat out the other SEC teams and ACC teams for talent around here? What do I do? And one of that's staffing, of course. But secondly, it's on-field staff, I should say. But a lot of that support staff and guys you bring in there with that. And the people he's kept on board, in addition to the people he's bringing on board, you mentioned, Kane Womack, who's got fantastic ties already in the South. And, of course, has a unique ability to connect with Kalen DeBoer because they're best buds and previously worked together at Indiana. There's some good mix there. But also, NIL obviously is more of a factor now. Alabama, the pool, of course, was always Nick Saban. I mean, good God, who wouldn't want to be playing for the greatest coach of all time? Or heck, even as Gus Malzahn, who coached against them every year, and his rivals against them, told me last week he's the best coach to ever walk the planet.
No, I don't disagree.
No, it doesn't matter sport. So
yeah,
and their NIL hasn't been the big thing for them. It's Nick Saban, and they've got to pump that thing up. And that is holding them back a little bit. And you're seeing all these players in the portal. There's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of them are leaving because Saban's gone. But some of it is, I just know I can get more money somewhere else. And I could probably go win a national championship or have a better shot at it this upcoming year because of the year you're going to be in transition to Alabama. So we just saw recently Caleb Downs, who's the biggest fish to jump in the pond, regardless of position anywhere in the country. The All-American safety freshman, jump into the portal, and certainly Georgia's the one to watch there because of Travaris Robinson going to Georgia and Georgia's NIL program being so much better and bigger right now than Alabama. And that it doesn't listen. I know people just say, okay, so we just need a couple of boosters step in, bump that thing up to $18 million. We'll be okay. It's much more difficult than just asking a couple of guys to throw in money. It's about the infrastructure of it, the way they go about building contracts, obviously having a projects for these players to do to compensate. I mean, you're not just throwing money at them. They got to do something in relation to that. And it's very difficult to build that all out overnight. And that's, I think, one of the things Kalen DeBoer is going to have to focus on here this offseason, because that is one of the several reasons why they're losing all these players in the portal. And for that matter, losing so many great players, especially in that secondary. My colleague, Mike Rodak, I'd have to pull it up, put out information today about just how many defensive backs they've lost. It's dire for Alabama. And I never thought I'd say that.
And all the other best players are going to the NFL and will be drafted very highly. So no, there's lots going on there. Texas has also got a very high level NIL infrastructure built out. They're taking some players as well. This is,
Texas A&M, of course, as we all know, has always had that. And they're creeping out. I mean, they got the number 2 transfer portal class in the country right now. And number 1 is Ole Miss. So,
Welcome, Kalen.
I know exactly, but it's so strange to sit here and go, man, life's tough for Alabama.
Well, but again, going back to, and I don't know what you know about the Washington infrastructure as well. Part of why, if I'm an Alabama fan, part of why I like Kalen DeBoer and trust his ability to do all the things that you're talking about is clearly he had a focus on that at Washington. That is clearly one of the, you can draw a direct through line with that infrastructure and that back end support staff stuff that you're talking about at Washington to them playing in the national championship. Like you can draw the direct comparison. So if I'm an Alabama fan, I'm excited about his ability to build that out at Alabama.
That, and I'll say this, like, and this is much more challenging than it was day one when he went to Washington 2.5, 3 years ago, is that he went in there and a lot of the team was about to just leave and enter the portal themselves. Roma Dunze, for example. I mean, can you imagine Washington without him? And he obviously brought in Michael Penix from the portal himself, but they had to convince a lot of guys just to stick around. NIL was a huge part of that, but also the relationship building. The Kalen DeBoer is like almost honest and too loving to a fault in some points, but
that West Coast energy.
Yeah, but the Midwest energy, that's Sioux Falls energy of his. But he comes into Alabama where it's a little bit of a different animal. Just like being honest and nice to someone's probably not going to convince someone just to stick around. There's a lot of money, and just this is a business now, and I've got to go make a business decision, not just money wise, but also my NFL stuff, and also I want to win a championship right away. Do I feel comfortable being able to do that right away here? But I thought that we say hemorrhaging with Alabama right now, I thought it would be slower than what it is, but I'll still say this. I don't think it's as drastic of a mass exodus as maybe some people were expecting. As of last check, there were 26 Alabama players in the portal or who had entered the portal, but I believe only 7 or 8 of them have left since Saban
7
retired. So this isn't like, oh, Saban retired and 2 days later, 15 players are in the portal. It hasn't been that. It's been a slower trickle, but again, it's not just trickles. It's big, giant drops of rain, and Caleb Downs, of course, being the biggest one.
Could you argue that that with Kalen DeBoer running the offense and Kane Womack calling the defense, that Alabama went from league average play calling last year, best case scenario with Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele or whoever it was that was eventually calling defense. Whoever was calling the defense, there was a debate there, I guess, at the end of the year. But let's just say hypothetically, play calling league average, let's say, maybe even slightly below in the SEC, that they are now among the better teams from a play calling standpoint on Saturdays with Womack and DeBoer and whoever else might be on the offensive staff.
Oh, yeah. And Ryan Grubb's going to call the plays, who is at Washington. I love Grubb. I mean, Grubb, when you start dissecting and looking at the stuff and all the formations he throws at people, it's fantastic stuff. And most definitely, that's an improvement over Tommy Rees. And I think Tommy Rees is a really good coach. Kane Womack, go look at the analytics, the improvements they've made at South Alabama with that roster when it comes to defense. He's better than what Kevin Steele was here the last couple of years of his career. And of course, T-Rob, fitting into that as well. So yeah, this is definitely one of the top half play callers in the SEC. Again, you sit there and you kind of hesitate. You go, I know what they can do elsewhere. Let's see what they can do with this Alabama product in the SEC and everything. But as far as just like sitting down at a chalkboard and running, I say chalkboard. What am I, 75 years old?
You've worked for newspapers too, Brandon.
Oh man, I miss them so much. I was actually looking for an old newspaper. I was looking for an old newspaper box that you would see on the street curb. I was trying to buy one. During Christmas.
Total aside here, but my wife and I were cleaning out my in-laws bonus room attic that's just filled with stuff, And we open up this manila folder, we pull it out, and it's the Tennessean from 1998, and it just says, champions on it. And it's like he had stored it, this really perfectly crisp newspaper cover of the Tennessean about Tennessee's national championship in '98, and it was just like in
Yeah.
an envelope. It's like that should be under glass somewhere because newspapers are gone, man.
Nothing will ever replace that. Being able to, and I used to do that as a kid. I used to take the newspaper clippings and stuff and just post them up raw on my wall with
Oh yeah,
thumbtacks and stuff. And speaking of Tennessee, I'm an Arkansas guy. So when Arkansas got their revenge against Tennessee in 1999 and took the goalpost down and took them down to Dixon Street, I took the front page of the Northwest Arkansas Times and put it up on my wall. And I got to work for the Northwest Arkansas Times later in my career, which was like a dream.
that's
Anyway,
cool. That's cool.
I
No,
miss
that's cool.
newspapers.
So speaking of evolution, and this kind of speaks to what Kalen DeBoer has to do, what Hugh Freeze has to do, but also what Lane Kiffin is trying to do at Ole Miss. Eli Drinkowitz is, if there wasn't a rivalry with Oklahoma in the past, because Oklahoma dominated that rivalry, Eli Drinkowitz is doing his best to create one in the SEC through some of this stuff as well. What I'm curious about with you is, and this speaks to Hugh Freeze wanting to kind of build from recruiting. I still don't know if the portal, the new rules, NIL, collective, all these things that we talk about all the time, I think it can get teams into the playoff. I think Ole Miss is clearly going for it, right? If Nico is great at Tennessee, they're going for it. Like these teams can go for it. Now, Tennessee's a little different. They've normally recruited a higher level routinely over time than maybe Ole Miss or Missouri. But do you think it closes the gap enough that these teams can win 2 or 3 games in the playoff? Or is this just tricking teams into thinking that they've got a chance? It does feel like Alabama's talent has been spread out, even with Saban coaching the last few years. So do you think that 5% of spread of talent and the portal and all these things actually does give these other programs opportunities to compete for national championships and not just playoff berths?
Also, I'll say this, just going back even further, even before the portal really became a thing because of immediate eligibility, now multi-time transfers being immediately eligible. Texas A&M was almost like sucking up more talent away from Alabama as well from high school recruiting in those last three recruiting classes. So, but we'll see. That's the thing. I know people want a definitive answer to that, but we'll see because we haven't seen a 12-team playoff yet, what that's going to look like. But I will say that there is a quote-unquote blueprint right now to show that you could be a team that gets to the national championship game. And that's by bringing in some transfers, but more importantly, keeping the kids you have on your team this year on the roster who might be considering, one, transferring, but more importantly, going to the NFL. Washington was able to convince kids to come back. Michigan was able to convince the kids to come back, and they met in the national championship this year.
That's true.
Who's doing that this year?
Oregon's doing it.
Oregon's doing it, and Ohio State is doing it. Ohio State, I think, has had the best offseason of any program right now as far as building toward next year. Ohio State is a playoff team, obviously, next year to me, but is built to win a national championship next year because they got really good veterans on there that aren't just veterans like a Washington had or a Michigan had, but they're like
NFL
first
guys.
2-round NFL guys.
Yeah.
Ole Miss might have the best transfer class coming in, and they're going all in on this year. Let's win a championship. But is that all those hired guns, so to speak, coming in immediately and just gelling, and then they become a championship team overnight? Probably a playoff team, but I don't know if that holds together where they're able to, when you're out there on the field and just knowing the little intricacies of how your receiver runs this route or whatever. I mean, good God, just look at, I always look back at that Rose Bowl between Michigan and Alabama and J.J. McCarthy's pass there near the sideline that somehow gets tipped, but is just, it deflects up and the pass is a little bit higher. And that receiver, guarantee you, if that was his first year playing with McCarthy as a transfer or whatever, and hadn't really caught passes with him all that much, then he probably misses it. But he got it, and then Michigan ends up winning the game. So there's a lot of little just intangible things that you cannot necessarily identify that goes into all this. But I think that the way you could kind of negate that, or not negate it, but how to define the intangibles is by simply, and most difficult of all, simple and difficult, keeping your veteran players on
Yeah.
the roster who can go to the NFL and make millions of dollars right now if they choose to.
I might have put Ole Miss in that category, and then Judkins leaves to go to Ohio State. Perfect, a very refined understanding of Big Ten football from an SEC running back, by the way. Post announcing his transfer minutes after Michigan wins the national championship. I find that to be fantastic. But
one minute, I'm told,
That's
right? That's what I was told. Because Ryan, yeah, I saw Ryan Day the very next day after that.
There's no way that beard is authentically colored. Anyway, I think what's interesting to me about my theory on this is that it's going to close the gap some, but that you still cannot, and you can fill in voids with the portal. Certainly, quarterback is obviously something you can fill with the portal. Not necessarily the first year. You need it, like Joe Burrow, year 2. Cam Newton's really the only one that did it like year 1, and that was a different brand of football, different type of player, special one of one type of guy. But like I think Ole Miss and Missouri and Tennessee and these teams can get to the playoff. I think you still need to have, like as Lane Kiffin said to us out of his own mouth, I don't have enough 5 stars. I think they can win a game, maybe win 2 games, but winning 4 games in the playoff without recruiting in the top 10 or 12, I still don't know if that's feasible. I mean, you mentioned Ohio State. Like I could see Georgia and Ohio State and A&M and Alabama doing this, but that's because they're in the top 10 in recruiting all the time. And so I don't know. My theory is we're tricking ourselves into a more competitive sport when in the end it's still just going to be, Bama versus Georgia or Ohio State versus Clemson or whoever it is this, Texas versus USC, whatever it might be.
Probably so, because I think we were tricking ourselves into believing that 10 years ago when we went to a 4-team playoff. And what happened? It's the same 3 teams winning the championship over and over and over again. But I will say this. I do think that the days of quote-unquote dynasties is over. The most you're going to see, I mean, obviously we haven't seen a 3-time champ. I think it'd be a stretch to even see a back-to-back champ here in the next 5 years as the sport kind of meanders and swerves across the road and figures out exactly what their bearings are and how you need to build a roster these days, how you keep it together, how you keep a coaching staff together, what the Big 2 looks like. Is there an opportunity for a Big 12 team or even an ACC team to win the national championship, and why? How did they do it? Why did they do it?
Yeah.
But again, it all comes down to high school recruiting. As much as we fall in love with the portal and the immediacy of it, it's high school recruiting and development.
Depth. It's 1 to 85. All right. I'll let you go with this. You're obviously very gracious with your time. We do appreciate you. Alabama, Texas, and Georgia are going to be atop every preseason ranking in the SEC and maybe even the top 25s. As we are working together, as we are working at Athlon to even begin this process very early. In the SEC, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, A&M, Tennessee. If I'm missing somebody, throw somebody in there. Who are the teams in that group that you love to challenge?
Ole Miss, of course, and because of the pieces they're bringing in, but also just Jackson Dart coming back. I think that's huge for them at quarterback and the development he's made. And plus, listen, that Ole Miss schedule is conducive. Like an above average Ole Miss team should start off 5-0 or 6-0. And this is not an above average team. It's a great team, maybe the best team ever put on paper in Ole Miss history. They should win 10 games next year. I think anything under 10 wins next year would be a disappointment for them and for the fan base there. I'm not completely sold on Mizzou next year going in with the schedule and some of the guys they've got coming back and the staffers they've had leave. I think Blake Baker's a fantastic coordinator, and then losing Kevin Peoples, he's just a veteran defensive line coach, and that was really their strength up front this year. That I think that could be a hit for them. Tennessee, I think Tennessee's on the rise this year. I do, with Nico and the pieces they've got in. But to me, it's Ole Miss, and and maybe Texas A&M could be sneaky. I say sneaky good. They could probably win 9 games next year, and that'd be seen as a massive success considering what's happened the last 2 years. But they also have the type of talent on that roster where they could, and maybe not should, but they could win 9 games. So those are my 3. But Ole Miss by far, I think, is far and away above the pack.
Probably should have thrown Oklahoma in there as well. Brandon Marcello, national college football reporter for 24/7 Sports. Always a pleasure talking with you, man. Great to see you. And try to enjoy the offseason. Take a deep breath. And thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.